My husband hid the invitation from me, so I arrived with the revised will in my purse. The December rain drummed against the windows of our modest ranch house in Birmingham, Alabama, as I sat in my favorite recliner, still wearing the police uniform that had been my second skin for 34 years. At 59 years old, I had just completed my final shift as a sergeant with the Birmingham Police Department, and the weight of retirement was settling over me like a heavy blanket that I wasn't quite ready to wrap myself in. My husband Richard sat across the living room, his attention seemingly focused on the evening news, but I could feel the tension radiating from his rigid posture and the way his fingers drummed nervously against the arm of his chair. What I didn't know at that moment was that Richard had been intercepting our mail for the past 3 weeks, carefully screening every piece of correspondence that arrived at our house to ensure that I wouldn't see the formal invitation to my own retirement celebration that the department had planned for the following evening. His deception was part of a larger scheme that would soon unravel in the most spectacular and humiliating way possible, revealing not just his betrayal but also the true nature of the man I had been married to for 27 years. If this story is resonating with you, please take a moment to comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Give this video a like and subscribe to our channel because we truly help families who are going through these difficult situations. Your support helps us continue sharing these stories of overcoming adversity and finding strength in the darkest moments. The reason Richard was hiding my retirement party invitation wasn't out of concern for my feelings or desire to protect me from some unpleasant surprise. Instead, he was orchestrating an elaborate plan to publicly humiliate me in front of my colleagues, friends, and family members by announcing at the party that he was divorcing me and had already retained a high-powered attorney who specialized in maximizing financial settlements for wronged spouses in divorce proceedings involving law enforcement officers with substantial pension benefits. Richard's resentment toward my police career had been building for decades, though he had rarely expressed it directly until the past few years when his complaints became more frequent and bitter. He claimed that my dedication to the job had made me an absent wife and partner, that I had prioritized the safety of strangers over the comfort and needs of my own household, and that my irregular schedule and occasional dangerous assignments had created unnecessary stress and anxiety in his life that had damaged his health and career prospects. What Richard conveniently ignored was that my police salary had been the primary source of income for our household throughout most of our marriage, especially during the years when he struggled to maintain steady employment in his chosen field of graphic design. My benefits had provided our health insurance, and my pension would be the foundation of our retirement security. But rather than feeling grateful for the financial stability my career had provided, Richard seemed to view my success as somehow diminishing his own worth and contribution to our partnership. Our marriage had begun promisingly in 1997 when I was a rookie officer and Richard was working as a freelance designer for local advertising agencies. We had met at a community art festival where I was working security and he was displaying his portfolio, and I had been attracted to his creativity, sensitivity, and apparent support for my unconventional career choice as a female police officer in a traditionally male-dominated profession that still struggled with issues of acceptance and equality. During our early years together, Richard had seemed genuinely proud of my work and accomplishments, often bragging to friends about his wife, the police officer, and showing interest in my cases and experiences on the force. He had attended department social events with enthusiasm, developed friendships with other officers and their spouses, and appeared to understand and accept the demands and risks that came with law enforcement work. However, as the years passed and my career advanced through promotions and specialized assignments, Richard's attitude began to shift in subtle but unmistakable ways. He started making sarcastic comments about my hero complex, complaining about missed dinners and interrupted weekends when duty called, and expressing resentment about the close relationships I maintained with my fellow officers who understood the unique challenges and stresses of police work. The turning point in our relationship came about 5 years ago when I was selected for a prestigious assignment with a multi-jurisdictional task force investigating organized crime activities in the Birmingham metropolitan area. The assignment required irregular hours, occasional travel, and a level of secrecy about my work that Richard found threatening and exclusionary, even though I explained repeatedly that the confidentiality requirements were necessary for both operational security and officer safety. Richard's jealousy and suspicion during this period reached paranoid levels, with accusations that I was having affairs with male colleagues, that I was deliberately choosing work over family, and that I had become addicted to the adrenaline and danger of police work in ways that made me incapable of appreciating the simple pleasures of domestic life and marriage. The task force assignment lasted 18 months and resulted in several significant arrests and prosecutions that earned me commendations from multiple law enforcement agencies and recognition from community leaders who appreciated the impact of our work on public safety. However, instead of celebrating these achievements, Richard treated them as evidence of my selfishness and misplaced priorities, arguing that my success came at the expense of our relationship and his emotional well-being. Following the conclusion of the task force assignment, I made genuine efforts to rebuild and strengthen our marriage by requesting desk assignments that offered more predictable schedules, planning special vacations and date nights to reconnect as a couple, and seeking marriage counseling to address the communication problems and resentments that had developed between us over the years. Richard participated in these efforts superficially, attending counseling sessions and going through the motions of reconciliation, but I gradually realized that his fundamental resentment toward my career and success had become too deeply rooted to overcome through conventional relationship repair strategies. He seemed to view our marriage as a zero-sum competition where my achievements automatically diminished his status and self-worth. The final years before my retirement were marked by increasingly bitter arguments about money, future plans, and what Richard perceived as my failure to properly prioritize our relationship over my professional responsibilities. He began making threats about divorce, claiming that he deserved compensation for the sacrifices he had made as a police officer's spouse, and researching his legal rights regarding property division and alimony in the event of marital dissolution. What Richard didn't realize was that I had been quietly preparing for the possibility that our marriage might not survive my retirement transition. With the help of a trusted attorney who specialized in protecting the interests of law enforcement officers in divorce proceedings, I had been documenting Richard's threats, securing my financial assets, and exploring my legal options should he follow through on his increasingly frequent promises to leave me and take half of everything I had earned during my police career. The attorney had advised me that Richard's lack of consistent employment history, his minimal financial contributions to our household during most of our marriage, and his unreasonable demands for spousal support based on alleged sacrifices that were actually normal expectations of any supportive marriage partner would work strongly in my favor should we end up in divorce court. More importantly, the attorney had helped me understand that Richard's plan to publicly humiliate me at my retirement party would actually constitute evidence of cruel and unusual treatment that could affect property division and alimony determinations under Alabama divorce law. By attempting to destroy my reputation and relationships with colleagues during what should have been a celebration of my career achievements, Richard would be demonstrating exactly the kind of vindictive and malicious behavior that courts consider when making decisions about spousal support and asset distribution. 3 days before my retirement party, I discovered Richard's deception about the hidden invitation purely by accident when I stopped by the police station to clean out my locker and return some equipment. My sergeant mentioned how excited he was about the party and asked if I needed any help with transportation or special arrangements for Richard's attendance. Comments that made no sense until I realized that I had never received any invitation or information about the event. When I confronted Richard that evening about the missing invitation, he initially tried to deny any knowledge of it, claiming that the department must have forgotten to send one or that it had been lost in the mail. However, when I pressed him for details about his plans for the evening and mentioned that I would be calling the station to inquire about the party arrangements, he finally admitted that he had been intercepting our mail and hiding the invitation as part of his strategy to surprise everyone at the event. The surprise he had planned was not a pleasant one. Richard revealed that he intended to use the retirement party as a platform to announce our divorce, to publicly list his grievances about our marriage, and to shame me in front of my colleagues by portraying himself as the long-suffering victim of a selfish and career-obsessed wife who had never properly appreciated his sacrifices and support throughout my police career. His plan was to wait until the formal speeches and presentations were finished, then request permission to address the gathering as my loving and supportive husband. He would then proceed to deliver what he described as a truth-telling speech about the real costs of police marriages, the sacrifices made by law enforcement spouses, and his decision to finally prioritize his own happiness and well-being by ending our relationship and seeking fair compensation for the years he had spent supporting my career. Richard seemed genuinely excited about the prospect of humiliating me publicly, describing his planned speech with the enthusiasm of someone who believed he was about to achieve some kind of justice or vindication for perceived wrongs and injustices. He appeared to have no understanding of how his actions would reflect on his own character or how they might affect his legal position in divorce proceedings, focusing instead on his desire to make me suffer embarrassment and social consequences for what he viewed as my failures as a wife. The revelation of Richard's plan was both shocking and clarifying, removing any remaining doubts I might have had about the future of our marriage, and confirming that the relationship had deteriorated beyond any possibility of repair or reconciliation. However, instead of trying to cancel the party or avoid the confrontation Richard had planned, I decided to attend the event and be prepared for whatever he might attempt to do. The morning of my retirement party, I met with my attorney to review the revised will and financial arrangements I had prepared in anticipation of divorce proceedings. The documents reflected my decision to leave Richard only the minimum spousal inheritance required under Alabama law, with the majority of my assets, including the house, my pension benefits, and my personal property, being placed in trust for my nieces and nephews who had always shown genuine appreciation for my career and achievements. The revised will also included specific language about Richard's threats and plans to publicly humiliate me, documented through recorded conversations and written communications that would serve as evidence of his vindictive behavior should he attempt to contest the will or claim that he deserved a larger inheritance based on his supposed sacrifices and support during our marriage. My attorney had also prepared a comprehensive divorce filing that addressed Richard's unreasonable expectations about property division and spousal support, including documentation of his irregular employment history, his failure to contribute significantly to household expenses, and his recent threats and manipulative behavior that had created an intolerable living situation and made continuation of the marriage impossible. The retirement party was held at a popular restaurant in downtown Birmingham, with more than 60 people in attendance including current and former colleagues, supervisors, community leaders, and family members who had gathered to celebrate my career and wish me well in retirement. The atmosphere was warm and festive, with decorations featuring photos from my years on the force, a slideshow of memorable cases and achievements, and speeches from various people who had worked with me throughout my career. Richard arrived at the party appearing nervous but determined, wearing his best suit and carrying himself with the artificial confidence of someone who believed he was about to achieve some kind of dramatic victory. He mingled with the guests, making small talk and accepting congratulations on my retirement, all while waiting for the appropriate moment to execute his planned surprise announcement. The formal portion of the evening included presentations from the police chief, my direct supervisors, and representatives from various organizations I had worked with during my career. The speeches were genuinely touching, highlighting specific cases and investigations where my work had made a difference in the community, praising my professionalism and dedication, and expressing appreciation for my contributions to law enforcement in Birmingham. As the formal presentations were concluding and people were beginning to relax and enjoy dessert, Richard approached the microphone and requested permission to speak as my husband and partner in life. The room fell quiet as he began what everyone expected to be a loving tribute to our marriage and his pride in my accomplishments. But what actually emerged was a bitter and vindictive attack on my character and our relationship. Richard's speech began with superficial praise for my career achievements but quickly devolved into complaints about the sacrifices he claimed to have made, the loneliness and stress he had endured as a police officer's spouse, and his decision that he could no longer continue living in what he described as the shadow of my professional success and public recognition. The room became increasingly uncomfortable as Richard continued his speech, detailing personal aspects of our marriage that had no place in a public forum and making accusations about my priorities and character that shocked the audience of colleagues and friends who knew me well. Several people began to fidget and exchange worried glances as they realized that they were witnessing not a celebration but a public humiliation attempt. When Richard finally announced that he was divorcing me and had already retained legal representation to ensure that he received fair compensation for his years of sacrifice and support, the room fell completely silent except for the sound of someone's chair scraping against the floor as they shifted uncomfortably. The atmosphere had transformed from celebration to mortification, with everyone present feeling embarrassed for both Richard and me. As Richard concluded his speech and looked around the room expectantly, apparently waiting for sympathy or support from the audience, I stood up calmly and walked to the microphone. Without showing any sign of the anger or humiliation that Richard had clearly hoped to provoke, I thanked him for his honesty about his feelings and his decision to end our marriage, acknowledging that relationships sometimes reach points where separation is the healthiest option for everyone involved. Then I reached into my purse and pulled out copies of the revised will and the divorce papers that my attorney had prepared, explaining to the assembled guests that Richard's public announcement had actually saved us both the awkwardness of having private conversations about the end of our marriage. I announced that I had already taken steps to protect my financial assets and ensure that the divorce proceedings would be handled efficiently and fairly according to Alabama law. The impact of producing these legal documents at the retirement party was immediate and dramatic. Richard's expression changed from confident triumph to shocked confusion as he realized that his attempt to ambush me had backfired spectacularly. Instead of catching me unprepared and vulnerable, he had walked directly into a situation where I held all the advantages and had anticipated his behavior perfectly. I explained to the gathered guests that Richard's decision to use my retirement celebration as a platform for airing personal grievances and announcing divorce proceedings had demonstrated exactly the kind of judgment and character that had led to the deterioration of our marriage. His inability to separate appropriate public behavior from private disputes showed that he lacked the maturity and respect necessary for any successful relationship. The revised will that I shared with the audience included specific provisions disinheriting Richard beyond the minimum required by law, with detailed explanations of his threats, his plans to publicly humiliate me, and his unreasonable financial demands that had made continuation of the marriage impossible. The document served as both a legal protection for my assets and a public vindication of my position in the divorce proceedings. The divorce papers included documentation of Richard's irregular employment history, his minimal financial contributions to our household, and his recent behavior that had created an intolerable living situation. The filing requested that the court award him only the minimum spousal support required by law, based on his demonstrated ability to work and his unreasonable expectations about being compensated for what were actually normal marriage responsibilities. As I concluded my response to Richard's public attack, I thanked the guests for their support throughout my career and explained that Richard's behavior at the party had actually provided me with additional evidence for the divorce proceedings that would help ensure a fair and efficient resolution to our marital dissolution. I assured everyone that I would not allow his vindictive actions to diminish my pride in my police career or my appreciation for the relationships I had built throughout my years of service. The reaction from the party guests was overwhelmingly supportive, with many people approaching me afterward to express their admiration for how I had handled Richard's inappropriate behavior and their continued respect for my professionalism and dignity under difficult circumstances. Several colleagues offered their assistance with practical aspects of the divorce process, including recommendations for additional legal resources and emotional support during the transition. Richard left the party immediately after my response, apparently realizing that his plan had failed completely and that he had actually damaged his own position in the divorce proceedings by providing me with witnesses to his vindictive behavior and unreasonable demands. His attempt to publicly humiliate me had instead revealed his own character flaws and strengthened my legal position significantly. The divorce proceedings that followed were concluded within 6 months, with the court awarding Richard minimal spousal support based on his demonstrated ability to work and his unreasonable financial expectations. The revised will remained in effect, ensuring that my assets would be distributed according to my wishes rather than being subject to his demands for compensation based on alleged sacrifices that were actually normal marriage responsibilities. The house that Richard had expected to claim as part of the divorce settlement remained mine, along with my pension benefits and personal property that represented the rewards for my dedicated service to the Birmingham Police Department. The court specifically noted Richard's behavior at the retirement party as evidence of vindictive and manipulative conduct that supported my request for minimal spousal support and protection of my separate assets. 1 year after the retirement party confrontation, Richard was still struggling to establish financial independence and had been forced to accept full-time employment in a field unrelated to graphic design after his unrealistic expectations about divorce settlements proved unsuccessful. His public behavior at my retirement celebration had become known throughout our social circle, damaging his reputation and making it difficult for him to generate sympathy or support for his version of our marriage difficulties. Meanwhile, I was enjoying a fulfilling retirement filled with volunteer work, travel, and activities that I had postponed during my police career. The house that Richard had expected to claim provided me with a comfortable and secure base for my new life, and the pension benefits that he had hoped to share supported the lifestyle I had earned through decades of dedicated public service. The revised will that I had produced at the retirement party became a model for other law enforcement officers who were facing similar challenges with vindictive spouses who viewed police careers as obstacles to their own happiness and financial security. My attorney began recommending similar protective strategies for officers whose marriages were threatened by unrealistic demands and manipulative behavior from partners who failed to appreciate the sacrifices and dedication required for successful law enforcement careers. The retirement party that Richard had intended to use for my public humiliation instead became a powerful demonstration of the importance of being prepared for manipulative behavior and the value of taking proactive legal steps to protect oneself from vindictive partners who prioritize their own grievances over mutual respect and dignity in marriage relationships. 3 years after that memorable December evening, I received a letter from Richard requesting a reconciliation meeting to discuss the possibility of resuming our relationship on different terms that would better accommodate both of our needs and expectations. The letter acknowledged that his behavior at the retirement party had been inappropriate and counterproductive, and expressed willingness to consider marriage counseling and other strategies for rebuilding trust and communication between us. However, the damage from Richard's public betrayal and the insights I had gained during our divorce proceedings had fundamentally changed my perspective on our relationship and my requirements for any future romantic partnerships. The revised will remained unchanged, reflecting my determination to maintain financial independence and security rather than risking further manipulation and vindictive behavior from someone who had already demonstrated their willingness to prioritize personal grievances over mutual respect and dignity. The lesson that emerged from this difficult experience was the importance of recognizing warning signs of manipulative behavior in marriage relationships and taking proactive steps to protect oneself legally and financially before situations deteriorate to the point where vindictive partners attempt public humiliation or other forms of emotional abuse as revenge for perceived slights or unmet expectations. My story has become an inspiration for other law enforcement officers, particularly women, who face similar challenges with partners who resent their careers and attempt to use emotional manipulation and public embarrassment as weapons in marital disputes. The revised will that I produced at my retirement party serves as a reminder that preparation and legal protection are essential tools for maintaining dignity and security when relationships become toxic and destructive. The Birmingham Police Department has used my experience as a case study in their family support programs, helping officers recognize signs of relationship deterioration and providing resources for protecting themselves legally and emotionally from partners who view law enforcement careers as threats to their own status or financial security, rather than as valuable contributions to community safety and public service. Today, 5 years after that December retirement party, I continue to live independently in my own home, supported by the pension benefits I earned through dedicated service and protected by legal arrangements that ensure my financial security cannot be threatened by manipulative or vindictive individuals who mistake marriage for an opportunity to claim rewards they never earned through their own efforts or sacrifices. The revised will remains a powerful symbol of the importance of self-protection and preparation when dealing with people who prioritize their own grievances and financial expectations over mutual respect, dignity, and appreciation for the genuine sacrifices and achievements that characterize successful law enforcement careers and the officers who dedicate their lives to serving and protecting their communities. If this story has touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Please take a moment to comment below and let us know where you are watching from, as well as your thoughts on marriage dynamics and financial protection strategies like this. Every perspective matters, because stories like these remind us that while relationships may face struggles, challenges, and even betrayal, there is always an opportunity for personal strength, legal protection, and moving forward with dignity intact. When you engage, whether it's through commenting, liking, or subscribing, you are helping us build a space where people can feel less alone and more empowered to protect themselves from manipulative behavior. Many people silently carry burdens within their marriages, and often just hearing that someone else has successfully navigated similar challenges can provide enormous encouragement and practical guidance for their own situations. Your support allows us to continue creating and sharing content that empowers individuals to recognize warning signs of manipulative behavior, take proactive steps to protect themselves legally and financially, and maintain their dignity and self-respect even when facing betrayal from people they trusted. We believe that even in the most difficult circumstances, there are strategies for protection and paths forward that preserve personal integrity and security. So please, if this message resonates with you, don't hesitate to leave a comment, like the video, and subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you're not just supporting us. You're standing with countless individuals around the world who find courage and practical guidance in knowing that they can protect themselves from vindictive behavior and move forward with strength and dignity. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for helping us continue to share these powerful stories of preparation, protection, and personal empowerment.